Hi, this is Editor's Take. I'm Sakshi Batra and I have with me Gaurav Choudhary. He's the Deputy Executive Editor of Moneycontrol, and we are going to be discussing the minutes of the meeting of the RBI's MPC meeting that was held on April 4th. Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for joining in. Now, in the last MPC meeting, we did see the RBI slashed the repo rate by 25 basis points to 6%. That's lowest in 1 year. But what are the highlights of this MPC minutes of this meeting?
So the key highlights are that while the governor, Shaktikanta Das, have said that there are growth concerns, Viral Acharya, the deputy governor, has actually talked about inflation concerns. So there are concerns on both sides, both on the growth side as well as on the inflation side. And it's not, and the concerns about inflation actually come at a time when headline inflation is quite low, very low, in fact. It's been at about sub 3% for many months now. And food inflation, we are in a deflationary trend, have been in a deflationary trend for a long time. But Viral Acharya has actually looked at what economists call the core inflation, the non-food, non-fuel inflation, and that remains very sticky at above 5%. And that is something that is a matter of concern. And also he has said that food inflation, while has remained low, there is a degree of volatility that remains a worry. So clearly going ahead, even the benign food prices could actually start elevating very soon. That is something that Viral Acharya is concerned about. Likewise, one of the external members, Chetan Ghate, for instance, have also echoed similar concerns. The governor said that clearly there are concerns on growth. Funding to the smaller industries remains a matter of worry, credit flow especially, and that needs to be enhanced.
Absolutely, and that is what we also witnessed in the last policy. We saw 4 members of the MPC, they voted for a 25 basis points cut in the repo rate, but 2 of them, they actually wanted to maintain a status quo. And that is the kind of disparity that we are seeing. I'll come to inflation bit again, but for now, the growth concerns, which Mr. Das has been focusing on, Governor Das has been focusing on. Do you think that the high frequency data has been indicating a slowdown in pace of growth?
Well, if you actually juxtapose the high frequency data with data that is coming from the financial sector, essentially the banking sector, we seem to be in some kind of a slowdown mode. Incremental credit growth is a matter of worry. That is showing that there is a bit of a slowdown in the broader economy. While the RBI's own orders are showing some degree of optimism, but that I don't think that is that is something that can be that need to be tested on over a longer period of time. Clearly, growth is a matter of concern. We will have to wait and see in the month of May, on 31st of May, what the GDP data, the final GDP data actually talks about in the quarter 4 growth as well as the full year growth. The quarter 4 growth could be sub 7%. And are we actually looking at a sub 7% growth for the last 2 quarters is something that will be keenly watched, especially because the new government is going to assume office very soon. Clearly, and if this comes at a time, and if this low growth comes at a time when inflation is rising, it could present the new government with a challenge to push growth and also contain inflation. Then that may not be always fiscally very easy.
Absolutely. So these will be the twin big challenges for the new government if at all we actually slip below 7% on the GDP front, and if at all the food prices continue to rise as they have been showing in the latest CPI and the WPI inflation data as well. But did the meeting also talk about the kind of indications we're getting from consumption, demand and on investments as well?
Yeah, clearly said. So they went through the data that was available with them, and also through the various RBI orders, the periodic RBI orders, as well as the inflationary expectations data. The very edifice of the India growth story has always been consumption. So if there is a drop in consumption, it almost necessarily reflects in lower growth in the GDP data, in the broader economy's growth. That is something that each time the MPC meets, they take a look at it. But as we know, the RBI's primary concern is to contain inflation. And if there is a tug of war between growth and inflation, and if there is a choice that has to be made between growth and inflation, the RBI will steadfastly remain on the side of inflation, because inflation management now remains its primary responsibility. They have to ensure that headline inflation, headline retail inflation, remains at around 4%, not uncomfortably above 4%. So that is something that the RBI is really fixated on. It's almost it's an obsessive fixation laid down by law. So they have to ensure that it remains within 4%, and that is why when Viral Acharya flagged that the non-food non-fuel inflation is actually worrisome. It's above 5% and in fact inching towards 6%. That is something I think in the next MPC meet they'll take a close watch on.
Absolutely. So they'll take a keen watch on which way the inflation is moving forward. But what does it indicate about the future policy on the rate front?
There are two things. One, the next policy comes in the month of June, and shortly after the new government takes place. But the MPC probably will wait for any interest rate cut decision. They'll have to wait. They will probably wait for the full budget to be presented. The full budget will be presented sometime in the first week of July, or maybe latest by the second week of July, and they will get a fairer idea of what's the government's borrowing plans there. Because as we know, government's borrowing has a bearing on the interest rates and also the liquidity situation, etc. So I would not expect that MPC would recommend a rate cut or a rate change in the next meeting in the month of June. But also we would know by the time the next MPC meets in the month of June, the second and more detailed monsoon forecast will come. We'll have a fair idea of which way the summer rains are moving, and if actually the summer rains are near normal or expected to be near normal as the Met's forecast in the first, and that's good news. That will probably help keep food inflation, keep food inflation low. But if it doesn't, then the MPC will take a very extremely orthodox view. Will likely take an orthodox view, because as I said, containing inflation remains its primary responsibility. I don't think it's going to deviate from that focus.
Right. Thanks a lot then, Gaurav, for sharing all that insight. Well, all eyes on the next MPC meeting, which will be held anywhere in the first week of June. So we'll just have to wait and watch out for which way the crude oil prices are moving. Is the normal rainfall which is expected, or the near normal monsoon that is expected by the IMD? If the onset of monsoon also happens on time, which way the food inflation prices also move in from here? Lots of factors to be watched out for before we get to any kind of direction which the policy takes in the next policy. Thanks a lot for joining us in this edition of Editor's Take, and do stay logged on to moneycontrol.com for more news and updates. Thanks for watching.